Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I have done these kinds of talks, right? These kinds of guest appearances where people are like, oh my God, I'm just blown away. I need to have you back on. It's like nobody is talking about
Yeah,
this
what
stuff.
I worry about with that, and this is, let me say this as we come towards the
But
end.
but let me look before
Yep,
you do that, before
yep,
you respond to that,
yep,
I want you to respond to what I just said. Does
yep.
that answer your question?
Um, nothing ever fully answers my question. You'll get that idea from me. But what I was going to respond to was that it was exactly that. So, what you just said about when people hear that on a show, they say, "Oh my God, I can't believe this. I want you back." Firstly, let me say this. I think the work you're doing and the things you're talking about are unbelievably important, right? Exactly what I said
And the reason
before.
I say that is not to toot my own horn.
No, 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 I know,
It's
I
to
know.
demonstrate that there's
It's important, without a doubt.
a lack
Um,
of information out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. So I think it's super important. I think mental health is important. I think people
Mhm.
should be understanding that. I don't think there should
And
be a
let me
stigma
say
about
one
it.
other thing. I
Okay.
don't pretend to be the end all be all answer in
Okay.
terms of representing mental health either,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Okay. This
So
is
I
my
think all those,
experience. I
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah,
something
for
to
sure.
add, but I don't think this is the end all be all. There's
For
lots of
sure.
other mental health experts out there.
Without a doubt. Right. So, but it's good. It's the right things we should be talking about. That's the headline of this for me.
Okay.
Because of that, because it's so important, I think it's critical that we understand it as best we can and we understand what is the pragmatic use of it, right? So what you said about people saying like come back on the show, I love it. That is, I would argue, those are the right things to be saying. What I often worry about for myself as much as anybody is how superficial is that statement, right? Like, are you actually going to change your life because of that? Do you actually understand how unbelievably hard it is to actually employ these strategies, right? And that brings me back to the question I asked before, which you just asked, right? Like for you, does it work? Is that the proof point? And you gave the analogy of the hiker, right? Where if somebody's going out on a hike and one person's super prepared, the other's not, who's going to turn out better? And I think the only way you can answer that question is to say, well, what does it mean to turn out better? I think in the hike, it means make it back alive from the hike. That's what we're looking at.
No, not just,
Okay,
I
but
mean,
just
you
for
can thrive. You can thrive in
okay,
that
fair enough. For
situation.
simple terms, though, we have to define what does it mean to be successful in that hike. And I think that there is a reasonable argument to
The
be made. And
hike, okay.
well, there's a reasonable
I think you're
argument.
taking an analogy and
Well, let me finish it
you're
though, because I think
okay.
sometimes, and
It's
this is part of it too, and I say this with love completely. You do jump in a
uh
lot, and I think it's tough for you to hear exactly what I'm saying because you're constantly
no, I
coming
don't.
in with the next
Okay.
thing. And I don't say that as I do that too. So, but let me finish the point. Let me just say it. You use the analogy of the hike to say your skills, which you have, make you better prepared than somebody that isn't have all the psychological, behavioral understanding, right? But at the end of the day, you are still on Twitter discussing social issues with people. Some people could look
Mhm.
at that and say, it looks like you ended in the same place in that hike, right? There's other people on Twitter arguing, discussing social issues. You were also on Twitter discussing social issues. I'm not passing judgment on that. What I'm
No.
saying is that's proof of how hard this is, right?
Oh, I don't doubt it.
It's proof of the fact that we all are blind to things that we don't realize, right? It seems so clear, right? We come into a conversation and say, this is the information. If people just had this information, the world would be so much better. What does it look like for that to be better? Well, they wouldn't be just arguing with each other so much. And, social media is a big issue of it. For you to also be on there talking politics, somebody could look at that and say, like, I'm not sure you're getting to the right place in that hike. Now, who are they to say? Who am I to say? Who's anybody to say?
Okay, so what is your question?
I guess my point is I would be cautious to believe with such certainty that the information that is had within psychology, mental health professions, which you have, is as all encompassing and conclusive as we're saying it is, right? And I don't say that in a mean way. I say that for myself, for you,
Okay,
for
so
everybody.
what would you suggest instead?
Well, the very simple thing, and we're towards the end of time here. I would ask you the question. I would love to ask you some questions around this of like, why are you on Twitter talking about politics and social issues? Do you feel like good is going to come of that?
So you didn't answer my question.
I don't know even know where
So
we are on the
the
question.
issue that I'm having right now is that I use an example and you focus on that example and pick that example apart.
Yeah, yeah,
It's an
yeah.
example, it's an
But I need to be
analogy.
real. It needs to be tangible.
And well,
I can't, I have this
you're
theory
trying
that
to you're
most of
trying to
us live
simplify
in an
something that
illusion.
is
Hold on
so
one sec. I have this theory that most of us live in an illusion, right? And my fear is always, that's why I do this show, because I think I live in an illusion and I'm trying to understand it. So I don't mean this to come off like I know better or I'm smarter or anything like that. But when somebody says like I have this information and if other people had this information, the world would be better. My first reaction
Okay,
is
well, let's stop right there.
okay,
Let's stop right there.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. There's no doubt in my mind, because what we're
You
saying is
lost me
that
already on that.
this is the difference between mental health and not having mental health. Are you saying that mental health experts don't offer anything?
No, you know I didn't say that, right? Because what did I say before? I said
No,
the
hold
headline
on,
is
hold on, hold on.
okay.
Yes. Okay, so now you know how I feel, because you are taking, and you're taking a statement and you're generalizing it. But that's
What am
what
I
I'm trying to
generalizing?
clarify.
I'm
Because
sorry.
that, hold on,
Okay.
okay? That's what I'm trying. This is what's the choice that we have? We either have don't bother,
Nope.
because it's not going to help at all,
Nope.
or do the best that you can, try the best that you can. That's what we're all trying to do. I remember you interviewing with the musician, and you were trying to say, well, how do we know, we don't know, but we try our best, right? And
Sure.
so if the two choices are do it or don't do it, what would you have me do?
I would have you do it with a lot less conviction and certainty. I would have
Okay,
you do it in a way in
okay,
which
let me stop on that.
okay.
Okay, okay. I am talking to you. This is
Yeah,
a podcast.
sure.
If you think I sit in a session with my patients and talk to
I don't care
them
about
the
that.
way I'm
I care
talking to
about this
you,
though, but I
or
don't
the
care
way
about
I,
that. I care
but you're
about
saying I
the
use
truth.
a lot of conviction.
Yeah, yeah. In this
Okay.
conversation, just in this conversation, just in this conversation.
Well, I'm
I'm not
using
suggesting
conviction
anything else.
because if you're making the assumption that the way I'm talking to you is the way that I would present this material
No, no,
out in
no. I'm not making that
public.
assumption at all. No, I'm not making that assumption.
Okay.
I'm making
So
I'm
what did
making
you
the
mean by I'm
assumption.
talking? What
I'm
did you
saying
mean
in
by I'm
this
talking with
literal
a lot of,
conversation, there's a lot
yes?
of conviction and certainty, and to some degree, like absolute statements in it. And that's what I'm getting to at the point of the illusion. I think perhaps you are approaching this in a way which is like, I'm saying certain words, but don't worry about those words. Like I actually mean this. And I'm saying, no, 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 but let's get to the truth of it. What is it actually? Do you actually believe that the information you have could fundamentally change the world? Do you actually believe that the world is literally
Okay,
imploding?
so
Not just
hold on a
examples.
second. Hold on
Yeah,
a second.
yeah.
If the criteria has changed the world, of course I'm not going to guarantee that.
Okay.
This is about, nobody is talking about
But
this.
that right there, that's it. Nobody's
Okay.
talking about this. That's not true. Plenty of people are talking about mental health. I could go online right now on Spotify or Google
Okay.
and Google mental health conversations in the media and find countless
In
ones of them.
terms of politics, in terms
Okay.
of politics, okay. And yes, there are people in the peripheries who are talking about this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But and think about this. I mean, climate change, gun
Sure.
control. I mean, they run into the same problems, right, with people.
But I think the
As far
problem
as getting,
is
no, hold on a second. Hold
certainty.
on a second.
Okay.
Okay, right. So I'm not trying to change the world,
Okay.
but I do believe, not only do I believe, I know from my experience and talking to other, this is the profession as a whole, that we do have something to offer.
Of course.
And this is the problem, is I think that a lot of people don't think that we have something to offer in terms of what's going on socially, socio-politically, right? I think, okay, that's good for the consulting room and that's good for helping out with, diagnosis, psychiatric diagnosis and things like that. But you don't have anything to offer as far as what's going on politically,
Mm.
right? I think that's maybe where there's
Mm.
the
Right.
the
Yeah, I see
that's
it.
the argument that I'm trying to
Yeah,
make.
yeah, yeah.
And not everybody might agree with me on that.
Do you recognize the
But
emotional charge in that argument though? And like as a psychologist, the ego involved, and again, I'm saying the reason these conversations are tough and why I hope and appreciate you in this is like I'm asking questions that in 99% of my life, if I ask these questions, people assume I'm an asshole. And I'm hoping that people like you understand that I'm
I
asking these
don't assume
questions.
you're an asshole, but what I will do is I will pick out when I think that you are using and your analytical skills to challenge something, and what it's doing is it's misrepresenting what I'm trying to say. And so that's where empathic listening comes in really well.
Sure,
Before you
sure.
ask a question, maybe
Do you
make sure you
see?
understand
Mm,
the statement
mm,
that I'm making.
that's
But we
fair.
don't have time for that. So that's fine.
That's a very fair point. I guess what I'm asking back of you, right? And this is the way these conversations go, is as you teach me and other people, as you should, because mental health professionals have a lot to offer about empathic listening and all the different skills you're talking about. I'm asking you to not be so sure that you are practicing those skills as well as you think they am. Just like I should be so sure that when I say I'm not trying to be an asshole, maybe I am being an asshole. When I say, hey, I'm asking this question because I want to get to the truth, maybe my ego's involved. Maybe there's emotions. Maybe there's things at play that I'm not even aware of because that's what makes
Okay.
this so hard.
So let me
Hold
get
on,
in.
and hold on, because that's a beautiful example though. When you speak to me about empathic listening, I've spent much of this conversation, and I don't say this judgmentally, I hope you understand, being interrupted by you. And that's the epitome of what I'm trying to get at. I think it's very easy to assume we have this tool and it's so powerful, and I have all knowledge of it, but we are so blind to ourselves of how much we don't know or how hard it actually is. And I think as you're speaking in this, that's what I'm saying. Just like you're asking me to be like, hey, you might want to try and understand what I'm saying and not misrepresent it. That's super fair. If I'm doing that, I definitely shouldn't do that. What I'm asking
Right.
you to do is in the same vein, right? I see you biting your tongue because you're like, I want in there, I want to jump in on this. Is for you to stop for a second and think about, for you, how does this all actually play out? How am I able to use these skills for myself to get to a better outcome? And I think all of us, a mental health professional, a non-mental health professional, a politician, somebody living on the street, somebody that's a CEO, we would all be much better off if we went in with a working assumption which says, I'm probably not as good as this as I think I am. I probably shouldn't be as sure as I think I am about this thing, because that gives us just the humility to do exactly what you've been talking about, which is so important throughout this episode. All the skills, all those things, you have to be able to control yourself first. And I think it's super
Okay.
hard. I can't do it very well. I know that. So that's kind of where
Okay.
I'm.
So there's a couple of things, couple of assumptions that
Sure.
you're making, which is
Sure.
that the way that I'm talking to you is the way that I talk to everybody when I'm
I'm
trying
not.
to
I'm just
get
talking
this
about
across.
this conversation. All I can talk about is this. This is the only conversation I know you from.
Okay,
I
but
know
you're
it's
giving me advice not to interrupt people
in this
in
conversation.
general.
No, no, just in this conversation. That's all I can speak to.
Okay, well that
I
I
don't know how
can.
you talk to anybody else. I just know in this conversation.
Okay, all right, fair enough. And the
Does
the
it bother you that I
reason
just gave you that advice?
that's what it sounds like
No, no,
because
but
you
does it
said
bother
don't
you that I just gave you advice that said
not
maybe
at
you
all.
shouldn't interrupt? Okay. I'm just
Not at
asking.
all.
I was just
Well, I
curious.
mean, I'm a human being,
Okay.
and I know that it triggers things,
Yeah.
but I know how to manage my own emotions, right?
Okay.
And separate it out. I don't
Okay.
use you as a mirror
Yeah.
for a sense of self or self worth. But you know, the other assumptions you're making is that you're assuming the reason why I'm interrupting you, right?
Oh,
What
fair
is the
assumption.
reason why you think I'm interrupting you?
I think you think I'm not understanding what you're saying, and you're worried that somebody that I'm misinterpreting it, and then therefore anybody listening is going to misinterpret what you're saying. That's my assumption. You're right. I don't know for sure. That's my assumption.
Right,
Is that right?
right. And
Is
that's why
there
it's important to check in with people. I
is there a
always
chance though that
say,
you're missing that you think I'm misinterpreting it because you're not actually letting me finish the point, and I tend to be verbose and convoluted. So if I got to the end of the thread, you might be like, "Oh, now I see." But by jumping in the middle, there's a chance that's why it seems like I'm misinterpreting it. Is there a
mhm.
chance of that?